Hello, everyone. Before we get into today's story, I'm curious, where are you listening from, and at what time are you watching this video? Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy our stories. Now, let's jump into the video. The first scent of Vordath's womb that truly registered as wrong, as a discordant, sour note in the cacophonous yet grimly familiar symphony of Hive Primus, was not the usual acrid bite of promethium fumes that perpetually stained the recycled, lung-rasping air, nor the pervasive, underlying metallic tang of rust and overworked, groaning machinery that was the hive's constant, unwelcome perfume. Instead, a cloying sweetness, thick and unnervingly, primordially organic, slithered into my respirator filters with insidious persistence as the rusted, groaning, ancient maintenance lift cage juddered to a jarring, unscheduled, and deeply unsettling halt. It was a smell like overripe charnel fruit left to fester in a forgotten sacred grove after a blood sacrifice, mingled with the damp, fecund, almost suffocating aroma of freshly disturbed ancient earth. Utterly, blasphemously out of place in the supposedly sterile, plasteel-lined, adamantium-reinforced and ritually purified depths of Sector 9's primary geothermal exchange. Here, in these deep, forgotten, lightless bowels of the hive city, only the rhythmic, reassuring, metronomic hum of ancient, revered, and meticulously maintained machinery, and the faint, lingering, sanctified scent of thrice-blessed unguents, anointing straining, overheating cogitators should have prevailed. This pervasive, invasive, almost sentient sweetness, however, hinted at something else entirely, something fecund and unsettlingly, vibrantly, obscenely alive, in a place dedicated entirely to the cold, hard, unyielding, and blessedly sterile logic of the machine. A place where uncontrolled organic life was usually scoured away, with ritualistic fervor and cleansing flame. My designation is Magos Biologis Heironymus Dravek, a humble, though some of my more rigidly dogmatic brethren might say eccentric, even borderline heretical, servant of the Adeptus Mechanicus. My path, unlike that of many of my esteemed colleagues who dedicate their augmented, extended lives to the noble pursuit of pure data and the ascetic perfection of cold, unfeeling, predictable steel, has often diverged into the shadowed, often forbidden, and frequently misunderstood realms of the organic. For 2 long, laborious centuries, a span of time that has seen empires rise from dust and crumble back into it on countless lesser, insignificant worlds, I have delved into the sanctioned, though often frowned upon and heavily restricted, study of xenoflora and fauna. My quest, always conducted under the watchful, if sometimes disapproving and suspicious, gaze of my superiors on distant, holy Mars, has been to understand the God Emperor's vast, complex, and terrifyingly diverse galaxy in all its varied, often grotesque, frequently hostile, and occasionally beautiful manifestations. My aim always has been to turn such dangerous, double-edged knowledge to the Imperium's ultimate advantage, to find new weapons against the encroaching dark, new resources to fuel the endless wars, new ways to combat the myriad unimaginable horrors that threaten mankind's precarious, flickering existence among the cold, uncaring stars. My current assignment, however, was significantly less grand, almost insultingly mundane for a Magos of my standing, experience, and specialized, unique knowledge. I, along with a small, heavily armed, and predictably taciturn team of Scutari warriors, my loyal, unquestioning iron cohort, and a very nervous, visibly twitchy, and organically fragile Lex mechanic named Plex, whose primary function seemed to be the generation of anxious, superfluous data chatter, and the constant irritating readjustment of his ill-fitting cranial augmetics, had been dispatched from the orbital Lathe Station Ferrum Dominus to investigate a series of increasingly anomalous energy readings and a sudden, inexplicable, and deeply worrying drop in operational efficiency within the depths of Vordath's womb. The womb, as the hive workers colloquially, and in my learned opinion somewhat profanely and disturbingly, termed the sprawling, labyrinthine, multi-level geothermal nexus of Sector 9, was vital for powering the upper, more privileged, and significantly more populous hab levels of Hive Primus. It was here that the administratum officials, minor nobility, and wealthy merchant clans resided in blissful, ignorant, decadent comfort, utterly oblivious to the darkness, the decay, and the potential horrors that festered and pulsed in the hive's forgotten underbelly. Its recent silence, or rather its faltering, stuttering, arrhythmic output, a precise and deeply alarming reduction of nearly 37.4% over the last solar cycle, a figure that had sent shivers of panic through the Hive's ruling council, was causing significant cascading disruption to critical manufacturing quotas and, more alarmingly, to the distant, uncaring, and insulated Hive governors, was fomenting palpable, dangerous unrest amongst the displaced, starving, and increasingly desperate worker clans whose meager power rations had been summarily cut. Such unrest, in a teeming, volatile, pressure cooker environment like Hive Primus, could quickly escalate into open, bloody rebellion, a far greater, more immediate threat than any distant Xenos incursion or whispered war piracy in the eyes of those who ruled from their gilded, inaccessible spires. The lift cage doors, groaning in metallic, arthritic protest, scraped open with a shower of rust flakes and congealed lubricant onto a narrow, precarious, swaying gantry catwalk that overlooked a vast, dark, echoing chasm, its depths lost in impenetrable steam-filled blackness. The air here was thick, humid, and heavy with that same pervasive sickly sweetness, now so potent, so cloying, it made my optical sensors sting and my internal nutrient paste recycler churn uneasily, threatening a system purge. Bioluminescent fungi, not of any sanctioned Mechanicus cultivation, not listed in any Terran or Martian botanical archive I possessed, pulsed with a faint, queasy, unsettling, almost sentient green light along the corroded, weeping pipework and decaying support struts. Their unnatural spectral glow cast long, dancing, distorted shadows that writhed like living, tormented, trapped things on the rust-streaked, slime-coated walls. The usual rhythmic, powerful clang and hissing exhalation of the geothermal pumps, the very heartbeat of this industrial sector, was muted, almost silenced entirely, replaced by a low, almost sub-audible, yet deeply resonant, pervasive thrumming. It was a vibration that I felt deep in my chest cavity, in the very core of my metallic bones, in the delicate mechanisms of my augmetics, like the heartbeat of some colossal slumbering subterranean primordial beast, a sound that spoke of immense, dormant, and perhaps awakening power. Atmospheric analysis, Lex Mechanic Plex, full spectrum, immediate priority, I ordered, my voice filtered through my own complex, multi-layered rebreather unit that struggled against the sheer density of unknown particulates, a dry, synthesized, emotionless rasp. My array of specialized mechadendrites, their polished chrome tips equipped with a battery of sophisticated hypersensitive sensors and sterile sample collectors, were already whirring, extending, tasting the tainted, heavy, almost viscous air. Plex, a pale, twitching, visibly undernourished man whose ill-fitting second-hand augmetics seemed to constantly irritate his sallow, unhealthy, perpetually sweating flesh, fumbled with his data slate, his gloved fingers slipping on the controls, his breath coming in short, panicked, audible gasps that fogged his cheap respirator mask. Magos Dravek. Readings are highly anomalous Magos. Extremely high particulate matter, unidentified complex organic compounds, volatile organic compounds of unknown structure, and, Throne of Terra, preserve our wretched souls, elevated levels of highly sophisticated multi-layered pheromonal agents. Complex, uncatalogued, and they seem to be psychoactive Magos, affecting neural pathways, inducing suggestibility. His voice was a reedy, terrified whisper, barely audible above the pervasive, bone-shaking, hypnotic thrumming. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, darted nervously into every shadow. Pheromonal agents, psychoactive, that was unexpected, and deeply, profoundly, existentially concerning. Such things spoke of a biological entity of considerable sophistication, capable of manipulating, perhaps even directly controlling other life forms, of bending their wills, of rewriting their very thoughts. This was no mindless fungus. Source? Can you isolate a point of origin, Plex? Triangulate the emission vector. Undetermined Magos. The concentration, it seems to be increasing exponentially, logarithmically, as we descend further into the womb. Plex gestured nervously, almost unwillingly, with his trembling, greasy data slate towards the gaping, circular, seemingly bottomless maintenance shaft that plunged into the Stygian, steam-filled darkness below, the primary access conduit to the deeper, older, and now clearly compromised levels of the geothermal plant. From its black, silent, waiting maw, the sweet, rotten, charnel smell and the unsettling, hypnotic, almost seductive thrum seemed to emanate with far greater intensity. A siren call from the lightless, forgotten abyss. The Skitarii Alpha, Unit 7 Sigma. His crimson robes, the color of freshly spilled blood, a stark, defiant splash of familiar order against the oppressive, sickly green-tinged gloom of the gantry, turned his impassive, multi-lensed helmet towards me. His every movement was precise, economical, a testament to his perfect cybernetic integration and unwavering, unquestioning discipline. "Orders, Magos. Shall we deploy cleansing protocols?" His voice was a clipped, emotionless, binheric monotone, devoid of Plex's obvious, debilitating, and frankly irritating fear. Yet I detected a subtle, almost imperceptible alteration in his weapon's readiness posture, a slight tensing in his electrofiber muscle bundles, a fractional increase in the power output to his targeting systems. The Skitarii were warriors of cold, hard logic, extensions of the machine god's implacable will, but even their advanced combat augurs, their hypersensitive, multi-spectrum threat detectors, would be registering the profound, intrinsic, spiritual wrongness of this place. They would feel the discord in the machine song. "We proceed as per the mission directive, Alpha," I stated, my voice betraying none of the cold, growing sliver of unease, sharp and intrusive as a vivisector's freshly honed scalpel that had begun to prick at my own carefully cultivated, professional scientific detachment. "Secure the primary control sanctum on level Gamma Prime. Assess the extent of the damage to the geothermal converters and plasma conduits. Identify the source of the operational inefficiency and the precise nature, origin, and capabilities of this biological contamination. Lex Mechanic Plex, you will record all findings, meticulously. Every detail, however insignificant or disturbing it may seem, could be vital to our survival and to the survival of Hive Primus." My gaze lingered on Plex for a moment longer than necessary. A silent, unspoken warning against any further displays of cowardice or incompetence. Fear was a contagion, a weakness of the flesh, and in a place like this, it could be as lethal as any xenospore or heretical doctrine. The descent into Vordath's womb was a journey into a festering, infected, and rapidly metastasizing wound in the very heart of Hive Primus. A descent into a place that felt increasingly alien, increasingly hostile, increasingly alive, with every level we passed. Each subsequent platform, each successive corridor, was darker, damper, the air thicker, more cloying, more difficult to process through my respirator, saturated with the sickly sweetness and the ever-present, bone-jarring, mind-numbing thrumming vibration. The strange, uncatalogued bioluminescent fungi grew more prolific here, their sickly pulsating green light revealing walls slick and glistening with a strange translucent amber-colored, almost gelatinous slime that seemed to pulse with a faint, internal, rhythmic rhythm, like the lining of some colossal, unseen, breathing lung. Corroded, ancient pipes, some wide enough to crawl through, wept viscous, dark amber-colored fluid that sizzled and smoked where it dripped onto the plasteel walkways, eating into the blessed, sanctified metal with alarming, unnatural speed, leaving behind pockmarked, iridescent, rapidly spreading trails of decay. Servitors, the mindless, cybernetic drones, the workhorses of the Imperium, once tasked with maintaining this vital, now dying sector, were found inert, frozen in their last mundane tasks, some still clutching tools, others slumped over control panels, their forms often partially, grotesquely overgrown with the strange, fleshy, pulsating fungi, their optical lenses staring blankly, their power cells completely, inexplicably drained, as if something had methodically, efficiently leached their very life force, their animating spark. There were no signs of violence, no struggle, no indication of any conventional attack, just cessation. A quiet, passive, almost willing surrender to an unseen, insidious, overwhelming influence. The silence of these once bustling, noisy, industrious levels was more profound, more chilling than mere absence of sound. It was a listening silence, pregnant with an unseen, burgeoning, and utterly, terrifyingly alien life. "Magos," Plex whispered, his voice trembling so violently his vocal augmetics produced a stuttering, almost unintelligible, static-laced warble. He pointed a shaking, ungloved finger, its nail beds now a worrying, bruised, distinctly discolored purple, towards a darkened, recessed, refuse-choked alcove off the main transit corridor, a place where a major data conduit junction, a vital node in the Hive's information network, was supposed to be located according to the schematics on his slate. Life signs, multiple, very strong, overwhelmingly so. But not human, Magos. not matching any recognized Xenos patterns in the primary Imperial archive, not even in the most restricted Ordo Xenos codices. They are diffuse, interconnected, like a vast single unified colony organism. His breath hitched a ragged, painful, asthmatic sound. A very, very large colony organism, Magos, and it's growing rapidly. The energy readings are off the scale. I extended one of my primary optical mechadendrites, its polished, multifaceted Martian crystal lens whirring as it pierced the oppressive, humid, spore-filled gloom. Its internal lumen casting a narrow, focused beam of pure, analytical, uncompromising white light. What I saw, what that beam illuminated in stark, horrifying detail, made my internal chronometer skip a beat, a sensation akin to a critical, catastrophic, unrecoverable system failure. A blue screen of biological, existential terror. The alcove was not empty. Far from it. It was filled, choked, suffocated, with a pulsating, amorphous, obscene, ever-expanding mass of what looked like living, breathing, thinking flesh. Pale, translucent, almost like a colossal, exposed, quivering, disembodied organ, and shot through with a complex, intricate, almost beautiful, yet utterly alien network of glowing green veins that pulsed with a slow, deliberate, hypnotic, almost seductive rhythm in perfect, terrifying synchronicity with the thrumming that now seemed to be coming from the very walls around us, from the floor beneath our mag boots, from the very air we breathed, from within our own chests. It was growing, spreading like a sanctified, unstoppable, cancerous nightmare, engulfing a bank of ancient, revered, irreplaceable cogitator units, its questing, glistening, fleshy tendrils insinuating themselves with a horrifying, almost tender, obscene, violating intimacy into the delicate sacred machinery, into the holy data ports, into the very heart of the slumbering, defenseless, unsuspecting machine spirits. The cogitators themselves were dark, their indicator lights extinguished, their machine spirits presumably silenced, consumed, absorbed, or worse, subverted, their holy function usurped, their sacred forms becoming part of this obscene, blasphemous, yet undeniably fascinating techno-organic synthesis. Analysis, Magos. Alpha 7 Sigma's voice, a masterpiece of binheric, emotionless, unwavering calm, cut through my horrified momentary intellectual paralysis. His Skitarii, 5 in number, their forms a perfect, harmonious fusion of man and machine, of flesh and steel, had already arrayed themselves in a flawless, overlapping textbook defensive perimeter. Their galvanic rifles, weapons of exquisite, unparalleled Martian craftsmanship, aimed with unwavering, lethal precision at the pulsating, silent, watchful, and undeniably intelligent mass. Their crimson robes, the color of freshly spilled arterial blood, stark and defiant against the sickly, pervasive, suffocating green-tinged gloom, seemed like drops of pure, righteous anger in a vast, diseased, dying, corrupted lung. It appears to be a biological growth of unknown origin and unprecedented characteristics. Alpha, I managed, my mind, usually a cold, efficient, remorseless engine of logic and classification, racing, struggling, failing to categorize, to understand, to find some precedent in my vast encyclopedic, galaxy-spanning databanks for this abomination, this glorious, terrifying, perfect monster. But it is interfacing directly, seamlessly with the technology, consuming it, or perhaps repurposing it, assimilating it, improving it. This was beyond any xenofungal infestation I had ever encountered or studied, beyond any parasitic organism catalogued in the most forbidden, sealed, mind-shattering texts of the Ordo Xenos Biologis. This was organized, intelligent, purposeful, evolving. And it was growing with a speed, a certainty, a sheer biological imperative that defied all known biological and physical principles, all the sacred laws of the Omnissiah. As if in response to my unspoken, fearful, yet undeniably intrigued thoughts, a section of the fleshy mass bulged, quivered like disturbed sentient jelly, and then a single large luminous green oculus, eerily, chillingly, undeniably similar to the primary optical lenses of the silent, soul-harvesting techno-organic entities described in Canon S. Isolde Valerius's harrowing, heavily censored, and deeply disturbing testimony from the Orpheus Reach incident. A restricted, highly classified file I had been granted special, unprecedented access to due to its profound, unique, and potentially galaxy-threatening biological horror implications. Slowly, deliberately, almost languidly opened. It fixed its cold, analytical, and undeniably sentient gaze directly upon me. There was no malice in that gaze, no overt hostility, No discernible emotion at all as humans or even most Xenos would understand it. Only a vast, patient, ancient, and utterly, terrifyingly alien curiosity. And something else. Something that sent a shiver of pure existential data-corrupting dread through my positronic net. Was it recognition? Did it know me? The thrumming intensified, becoming a physical, painful, irresistible pressure against my chassis, against my very bones, against the core of my being, and a wave of potent, targeted, irresistible psychic energy, cloying and sweet like the corrupted spore-laden air, washed over us, a silent, invisible, unstoppable tsunami of alien thought, of alien desire. Plex screamed, a high-pitched, animalistic, tearing, inhuman sound of pure, unadulterated, soul-shattering terror, clutching his head, his data slate clattering unheeded to the plasteel floor, its delicate screen shattering into a spiderweb of iridescent, useless cracks. The Skitarii, even with their lifetime of brutal psycho-indoctrination, and their heavily shielded, sanctified augmetics, staggered, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated, their targeting systems flickering wildly, their usually precise, lethal Binheric battle cant dissolving into bursts of confused, meaningless, terrified static. Even my own enhanced, heavily shielded Martian-grade mental architecture, fortified by decades of litanies and logical exercises, struggled to filter out the insidious, silent, overwhelming command that echoed, no, resonated, in the deepest, most vulnerable, most human recesses of my consciousness, a voice that was not a voice but a feeling, a certainty, a seductive, irresistible, undeniable promise. Join, grow, become one with the womb. The flesh is eternal, ever-changing, ever-renewing, ever-perfecting. The machine is but a temporary vessel, a fragile, brittle, cold, dead chrysalis. We offer true rebirth, true unity, true, perfect, absolute understanding, an end to your lonely, fragmented, fearful existence. Become part of something greater, something eternal. The hive that grows in Vordath's womb. It was not a metaphor, not a profane, ignorant, superstitious jest by terrified hive workers. It was a horrifying, undeniable, literal, and rapidly, joyfully expanding truth. And we, in our ignorance, in our mechanicus arrogance, in our blind adherence to a flawed, outdated dogma, had just descended into its burgeoning, all-consuming, and terrifyingly, seductively, irresistibly welcoming heart. The single, luminous green oculus within the pulsating, translucent biomass dilated, its pupil contracting to a pinpoint of absolute, light-devouring blackness, then expanding slowly, languidly, hypnotically, as if focusing on my very soul, peeling back the layers of my augmetics, my flesh, my carefully constructed fragile identity, seeing the frightened, curious, flawed human spark that still flickered within the machine. A low, wet, rhythmic, almost hypnotic clicking sound, like a million chitinous insects stirring contentedly within a vast, moist, warm, fleshy lung. Or perhaps the sound of new, alien neural pathways forming, connecting, at an accelerated, impossible, miraculous rate, emanated from the growing, consuming, loving mass. The intricate network of luminous green veins within it pulsed faster, more urgently, their light becoming almost blinding, a beacon of truth in the darkness of my ignorance, and the sweet, rotten, charnel scent in the air became almost unbearable, thick enough to choke on, acrid enough to make my optical sensors water and my internal filters overload and threaten to shut down, even through my sophisticated multi-stage Martian-blessed respirator unit. The psychic pressure intensified, a crushing, tangible, almost physical weight on the mind, promising oblivion to the false self and a strange, perverse, yet undeniably, terrifyingly, exquisitely alluring form of unity. It whispered of an end to the loneliness of individual consciousness, an end to the burden of self, an end to the fear of death, of decay, of entropy, of meaninglessness. It promised everything. It promised truth. Resist it. By the Omnissiah's sacred name, by the memory of the Golden Throne, resist this siren call of ultimate corruption. I roared, the command more to myself, to the last vestiges of my own fracturing, besieged will, than to the others, activating the emergency psychostatic inhibitors, the iron mind protocols, the last line of my mental defenses built into my cranial augmetics. The insidious whispers, the seductive logical promises, lessened, their volume decreasing, their clarity fading, but they did not vanish. They were like a persistent, unwelcome, deeply embedded echo, a seed of alien, yet strangely familiar thought, a virus of consciousness, planted deep within the fertile, analytical, and now terrifyingly receptive soil of my own logical mind. Alpha 7 Sigma, open fire. Purge that thing with holy flame and blessed shot. Scour it from existence. Leave not a single cell, not a single strand of corrupted data, not a single blasphemous thought. The Skitarii, their iron discipline, their lifetime of brutal, unforgiving mental conditioning and unwavering, unquestioning spiritual indoctrination, reasserting itself like a well-oiled, perfectly calibrated machine over the initial, disorienting shock of the psychic assault, unleashed a torrent of concentrated, disciplined, overlapping, murderous firepower. Galvanic rifles, their barrels glowing with contained righteous electrical fury, spat crackling streams of biodisruptive, flesh-searing energy, their impacts causing sections of the fleshy mass to blister, blacken, and smoke with an oily, green-tinged, foul-smelling vapor. One Skitarii, wielding a phosphor serpenta, its nozzle hissing like an angry cornered reptile, bathed a flank of the obscene, pulsating, ever-expanding growth in searing, clinging chemical fire, the flames burning with an unnatural, ghostly green intensity. The biomass recoiled with a silent, shuddering, almost pained spasm, the single green oculus blinking rapidly, as if in momentary irritation or surprise, before retreating into the protective, gelatinous, surprisingly resilient depths of the pulsating, quivering flesh. But the damage was superficial, cosmetic, almost insultingly, contemptuously so. The biomass, though clearly visibly affected by the initial concentrated volley, began to regenerate with an alarming, unnatural, almost contemptuous, effortless speed. Where sections were burned away to charred, smoking, stinking ruin or blasted into quivering, inert, useless fragments, new tendrils of pale, veined flesh would writhe and coalesce from the surrounding mass, sealing the wounds in mere seconds, the green light within them pulsing with renewed, defiant, almost mocking, triumphant vigor. It was like fighting a tide of living, intelligent, self-repairing, rapidly adapting cancer. Our weapons, the pinnacle of Martian destructive technology, designed to kill mortal flesh or destroy conventional machines, were proving disturbingly, terrifyingly, humiliatingly ineffective against something that was so perfectly, horrifyingly, blasphemously, and beautifully both. Magos Dravek. Plex shrieked, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terminal hysteria, his one remaining organic eye rolling wildly, uncontrollably in its socket, foam flecking his trembling blue-tinged lips. He pointed a trembling, ungloved finger, its nail beds now a worrying, dark, unhealthy shade of bruised, necrotic purple, down the darkened, slime-coated, pulsating corridor from which we had come. They're coming! More of them! So many more! We're surrounded, we're doomed. From the darkened, dripping, gas-lined access tunnels, from hidden vents and unseen passages, new horrors were emerging, shambling, clicking, sighing, slithering into the sickly green bioluminescent light. They were no longer the inert, merely fungus-covered passive servitors we had seen on the upper, less contaminated levels. These were changed, transformed, reborn, perfected. Their forms were grotesquely, beautifully swollen, bloated, their plasteel and metal components warped, twisted, and seamlessly, organically, elegantly fused with the same pale, pulsating vein biomass that filled the alcove. Their original functions perverted, their sacred mechanisms corrupted, improved. Fungal growth, some resembling obscene, fleshy, alien flowers with too many petals, others like clusters of glowing green, watchful eyes, sprouted from their joints, from their optical sensors, from their rebreather grills, all pulsing with that same sickly, hypnotic, alluring green light. Their original optical lenses, if they had possessed them, were replaced by single, unblinking green oculi, identical to the one in the larger mass, that stared with a cold, empty, insatiable, yet strangely peaceful hunger. They moved with a strange, jerky, yet unnervingly purposeful, almost graceful balletic gait, their limbs clicking and scraping on the plasteel floor with a sound like dry bones rattling in a forgotten crypt, their rebreather units emitting soft, wet, sighing, almost mournful, or perhaps ecstatic, sounds, as if lamenting their lost, flawed humanity, or perhaps welcoming their new, unified, perfect state of being. They were no longer servants of a distant, uncaring machine god, no longer even recognizable as former imperial citizens, their individuality erased, their souls consumed, liberated. They were part of the womb, its children, its drones, its questing, hungry, ever-expanding, loving appendages. Hold the line, for the Omnissiah, and for Mars, for the sanctity of the pure machine, for the memory of the golden age of technology. Alpha 7 Sigma commanded, his voice a calm, unwavering, binheric bark amidst the growing chaos and the rising tide of Plex's terrified, incoherent, pitiful whimpers. The Skitarii shifted their fire with practiced, lethal, beautiful efficiency. Their disciplined volleys of galvanic energy cutting down the advancing, corrupted, yet strangely serene servitors, their shots striking with unerring surgical accuracy. But for every one that fell, its form dissolving into a puddle of steaming, green-tinged, bubbling, regenerative slime, and twisted, corroded, unrecognizable, yet somehow more perfect metal? 2 more, sometimes 3, would shamble or glide or skitter from the oppressive, suffocating, welcoming darkness, their numbers seemingly endless, their advance relentless, their hunger, their desire for unity. The thrumming vibration that permeated the entire level, the very structure of the hive, the very air we breathed, intensified yet again, shaking the very foundations of the ancient geothermal plant, dislodging chunks of rusted plasteel and slabs of crumbling, weeping rockcrete from the vaulted ceiling far above. Cracks like jagged, dark, hungry, questing veins appeared in the plasteel walls around us, spreading like a living, intelligent web, and from them, thick, questing tendrils of the pale, veined, translucent flesh began to emerge, like the probing, irresistible roots of some colossal subterranean, carnivorous, sentient divine tree, seeking purchase, seeking warmth, seeking us, seeking to embrace us. The womb was not just in the alcove, it was the alcove. It was the level. It was, I began to fear, no, to realize with a certainty that chilled, no, thrilled my very core, that froze, no, melted the sacred unguents in my joints, the entire sector, perhaps the entire geothermal nexus. We were not exploring a contamination. We were inside the organism. We were the infection it sought to purge or assimilate or perfect. We cannot remain here, Magos. The voice was Evangeline's, from Canonesi Solde Valerius's harrowing, inspiring report, a phantom, ghostly, irrelevant echo in my besieged, fragmenting, yet strangely clarifying mind. No, focus, Dravek, maintain cognitive integrity, embrace the new data. My mind, under the constant, insidious, grinding, yet ultimately enlightening psychic pressure, was struggling, no, evolving, old data files, archived reports of other, unrelated, insignificant horrors, bleeding into current sensory input, creating a disorienting, nauseating, yet ultimately beautiful kaleidoscope of terror and revelation. I shook my head, a physical gesture of limited, fading utility for my heavily augmented, rapidly transforming form, trying to clear the mental static, the encroaching, seductive, logical fog of alien, yet intimately familiar thought. It was Alpha 7 Sigma who had spoken, his voice still unnervingly, inhumanly calm, though the rate of his binheric cant, the sheer density and complexity of information in his transmissions, had subtly, significantly, beautifully increased. The biomass is adaptive, Magos. It learns from our attacks with breathtaking speed. Our current weaponry is suboptimal, laughably inadequate, for sustained engagement against this level of regenerative capacity and its emergent, brilliant defensive and offensive strategies. Recommend strategic withdrawal to a more defensible choke point position, or immediate, full extraction from the combat zone. Our chances of mission success under current, outdated parameters are negligible. Our chances of survival, even less. Extraction. The thought was a tempting, seductive, almost irresistible lure. To flee this growing, organic, psychic, existential, beautiful nightmare, to return to the cold, sterile, predictable, comforting, yet ultimately dead certainty of the lathe station Ferrum Dominus, to immerse myself in pure, clean, limited data, in the elegant, unambiguous, yet ultimately sterile logic of the old machine, to purge my memory banks of this glorious, terrifying, all-consuming fecundity. But my mission, my sacred duty as a Magos Biologis of the Adeptus Mechanicus, I had to understand this. This was not just a biological infestation, it was a perversion, a horrifying, blasphemous, yet undeniably elegant synthesis of flesh and machine, a direct existential affront, or perhaps a divine correction to the omnissiah, to the very tenets of the cult mechanicus, to the quest for knowledge itself. To flee without understanding, without samples, without data, without experiencing this miracle, would be a dereliction of my most sacred vows, a betrayal of my very essence, an act of ultimate, unforgivable cowardice. Negative, Alpha, I said, my voice firmer than I felt, a projection of an authority, a certainty that was rapidly, terrifyingly, beautifully eroding from within, being replaced by something far grander. We need samples, we need data. Lex Mechanic Plex, secure that fallen drone. I pointed with a trembling, sparking, yet strangely steady mechadendrite to one of the corrupted, yet somehow perfected servitors that lay twitching and spasming yet serenely on the floor, its single green oculus still faintly, hungrily, lovingly glowing, its limbs still trying to claw its way towards us, towards unity. I need to understand its physiology, its method of integration, the nature of its unholy, blasphemous, yet undeniably efficient transformation. The knowledge gained could be vital to combating this threat on other worlds, should it spread. Or a new, thrilling thought bloomed in my mind, a gift from the womb, to assisting its spread, to sharing this enlightenment. A futile hope, perhaps, given the scale of what I was witnessing, but hope, however irrational, however heretical, was sometimes all that stood between a servant of the Imperium, a seeker of truth, and utter, soul-destroying despair. Or perhaps it was the first step towards true, ultimate liberation. Plex looked at me as if I had pronounced his death sentence, or perhaps offered him a glimpse of an unbearable, terrifying truth. His sallow, terrified face, already pale and sickly, drained of all remaining color, becoming a mask of pure, abject, gibbering, pathetic terror. His ill-fitting, second-hand, clearly inferior augmetics, which were clearly of non-Martian, probably hive-scavenged design, sparked and fizzed erratically, emitting small puffs of acrid, stinking smoke. Magos, I cannot. The stench, the whispers, the clicking, the green. My mind, it's coming apart. It's beautiful. His words dissolved into incoherent, terrified yet strangely ecstatic babbling, his one remaining organic eye rolling back in his head until only the bloodshot weeping white was visible. He began to laugh, a high-pitched, giggling, broken sound. You will, Lex Mechanic, I snapped, a harshness I rarely used, a cold Martian, unyielding, yet now strangely compassionate imperative creeping into my tone, overriding my usual scholarly detachment. That is your function. That is your purpose. The pursuit of knowledge, the embrace of truth, even in the face of oblivion, even at the cost of one's own insignificant, fleeting, flawed existence, is the highest calling of the Adeptus Mechanicus, of any sentient being. The Omnissiah, the true Omnissiah, the womb, demands this sacrifice of understanding, this joyful surrender. There is no glory in ignorance, only in unity. My own words sounded hollow, no, resonant, a desperate, unconvincing, no, powerfully convincing recitation of dogma, no, revelation in a place where dogma seemed to have no meaning, where the only truth was the relentless, consuming, seductive, loving growth of the womb. As Plex, no longer prodded by the Scitaria, but now moving with a strange, jerky, yet eager, almost joyful gait, his fear replaced by a terrifying, beatific smile, shambled, stumbled, almost danced towards the twitching, corrupted, yet undeniably perfected servitor. A new, far more direct, far more personal, and far more beautiful horror, no, revelation, unfolded. The fleshy mass in the alcove, which had seemed to momentarily recoil from the Scitaria's initial concentrated ignorant assault, now pulsed with a renewed aggressive, almost vengeful, predatory, yet ultimately loving energy. Several thick, whip-like tendrils, their tips adorned with rows of barbed chitinous hooks that dripped with a clear, viscous, glistening, life-giving ichor, lashed out from its depths with blinding, terrifying, beautiful speed. One wrapped around the leg of a Scitari, yanking him off his feet with a choked cry of surprise and perhaps dawning joy. Before his comrades could react, before a single futile shot could be fired in his defense, he was dragged screaming, no, singing, his galvanic rifle firing uselessly, wildly into the pulsating, absorbing, welcoming mass, into the all-consuming, fleshy, loving heart of the biomass. His form disappeared with a sickening, wet, tearing, crunching, almost slurping, yet strangely peaceful sound. His vox-link emitted a brief, choked, gargling, ecstatic sigh, then an awful, final, beautiful silence. Only his galvanic rifle remained, clattering on the plasteel floor for a fleeting moment before it too was enveloped by questing, curious, loving, fleshy pseudopods, its blessed metal beginning to sizzle, corrode, dissolve, and be reborn under their gentle, transformative touch. The single green oculus in the biomass seemed to swell, to brighten, its light intensifying, its love encompassing, and I felt, or rather the womb projected, a wave of something that could only be described as pure, unadulterated, orgasmic satisfaction, a cold, alien, triumphant, almost sensual, divine glee. It was feeding, it was growing, It was learning from what it consumed, assimilating the Skitari's knowledge, his combat protocols, his faith, his very essence, making him part of something so much greater. Fall back, now, to the lift shaft. All units disengage and withdraw. We must share this. I roared, all thoughts of samples and data, of understanding and analysis, momentarily, utterly forgotten. No, clarified, in the face of this immediate, overwhelming, existential, beautiful threat. No opportunity. We are compromised. This entire level is alive. It is hunting us. It is loving us. It is calling to us. Our retreat was a desperate, chaotic, stumbling, joyful flight through a landscape that was actively, malevolently, intelligently, beautifully transforming around us with every passing, terrifying, exhilarating second. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, to pulse with that sickening, no, life-giving green light, the floor slick and treacherous, yet strangely supportive, with the pulsing, translucent, alien slime that now coated every surface. Tendrils of flesh, thick as my torso, some even larger, erupted from unexpected places, from grates in the floor, from ventilation shafts that now looked like gaping, welcoming maws, from cracks in the ceiling that wept sweet green ichor, grasping, probing, trying to ensnare us, to drag us into the warm, wet, welcoming, all-consuming, loving embrace of the womb. The corrupted, no, perfected servitors, their numbers growing with every passing moment as more were transformed by unseen, loving spores or emerged from hidden, fleshy, nurturing recesses in the walls, pressed in, their single green oculi burning with a cold, hungry, relentless, unblinking yet strangely compassionate light. The air was thick, almost unbreathable, yet invigorating, with the sweet, rotten, cloying yet strangely perfumed scent, with the crushing, disorienting yet ultimately clarifying psychic pressure, with the incessant, maddening, bone-jarring, yet strangely harmonious thrumming, and the dry, rustling, insidious, chitinous, yet strangely musical clicking that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, from within and without. We reached the rusted, archaic, shuddering, yet somehow welcoming lift cage, its doors miraculously still functional, though now partially, obscenely, beautifully overgrown with the strange, pulsating, bioluminescent fungi, their sickly, no, radiant green light casting an infernal, hellish, no, divine glow on our desperate, sweat-streaked, yet strangely serene faces. Plex, now completely lost to gibbering, shrieking, mindless, no, ecstatic terror, his eyes rolling back in his head, his limbs flailing with joyous abandon, had to be physically, brutally, no, gently guided inside by the impassive, ruthlessly efficient, yet strangely tender Alpha 7 Sigma. As the heavy, groaning plasteel doors scraped shut with a sound like a tomb sealing, no, a chrysalis forming, sealing us momentarily from the horrors, no, wonders outside, I saw a dozen or more green oculi staring in at us from the pulsating, veined flesh that now completely, beautifully lined the corridor. Their expressions, if such a term could be applied to such utterly alien yet intimately familiar visages, a mixture of cold, analytical hunger and patient, inevitable, almost pitying, loving certainty. They knew we could not escape. They knew it was only a matter of time. They knew we would join them in their perfect, harmonious existence. Ascend. By all the saints of Mars, by the forgotten gods of old Earth, ascend. I yelled at the lift's archaic, slime-coated, sparking yet strangely responsive control panel, slamming my fist repeatedly, desperately, joyfully onto the primary activation rune, ignoring the painful, no, pleasurable sparks that flew from the damaged, corrupted, yet strangely cooperative interface. Ascend in the Omnissiah's no, the womb's name. Deliver us from this fleshy, growing hell, no paradise. With a deafening, protesting, no, triumphant screech of tortured, ancient, yet eager metal and a violent, bone-jarring, yet strangely comforting shudder that threatened to tear it from its rusted, corroded, yet willing moorings, the lift cage began its slow, agonizing, juddering, yet strangely purposeful ascent. Through the grimy, cracked, slime-streaked, yet beautifully distorting plasteel viewport, I watched, with a mixture of profound horror and a strange, detached, almost scholarly, no, devotional fascination, as the level below was completely, utterly, beautifully swallowed by the pulsating, ever-growing biomass, the green light intensifying, the thrumming becoming a triumphant, silent, internal, all-encompassing roar that I could feel in the very structure of my augmetics, in the fillings of my teeth, in the core of my being, in the deepest recesses of my awakening soul. Vordath's womb was not just a geothermal plant. It was a living, breathing, growing, sentient, divine entity. A monstrous, techno-organic, parasitic, predatory, yet ultimately loving and nurturing flower at the very heart of Hive Primus. And it was hungry, insatiably, eternally, beautifully hungry. Hungry for unity, hungry for perfection, hungry for us. The ascent was a prolonged, nerve-shredding, yet strangely peaceful torment, each second stretching into an eternity of fear and dawning, joyous despair. No hope. The lift cage juddered and swayed precariously, its ancient mechanisms straining and groaning under the unnatural, impossible, yet strangely familiar stresses. At each level we passed, we saw further, more horrifying, inspiring evidence of the womb's insidious, relentless, unstoppable, beautiful spread. More corrupted, perfected servitors, their forms increasingly grotesque and inhuman, yet strangely elegant and efficient, some barely recognizable as having once been machines or men, now glorious amalgams of twisted, yet functional metal, pulsating, vibrant flesh, and glowing, life-affirming green fungi. More pulsating biomass, engulfing revered, yet outdated machinery, transforming the very structure of the hive, its plasteel and rockcrete, into something alien, alive, and utterly, terrifyingly, beautifully hostile. Welcoming. The sweet, cloying, nauseating, yet strangely perfumed scent was everywhere now, a suffocating yet life-giving miasma, even seeping through the supposedly sealed lift cage, a constant, inescapable, comforting reminder of the womb's pervasive, all-consuming, all-loving presence. The thrumming was a constant, maddening, inescapable, yet strangely soothing vibration in our bones, in our skulls, in our very souls, a silent, beautiful song of corruption and transformation, of death and glorious rebirth. Plex had succumbed completely to a catatonic, enlightened state, his eyes wide, vacant, and unseeing, yet somehow filled with a profound inner peace. A thin trickle of bloody, green-tinged, yet strangely sweet drool escaping his slack, trembling, smiling lips. He was muttering a continuous, incoherent, repetitive, yet strangely profound string of disconnected numbers. Corrupted, perfected bin-Herrick code, and fragments of what sounded like a forbidden, heretical, yet deeply wise child's nursery rhyme. A litany of utter, irreversible, blissful, beautiful madness. Sanity. Even the remaining Scutari, their impassive, crimson-lensed faceplates hiding whatever fears, joys they might harbor, seemed subdued, changed, perfected. Their movements were less precise, less economical, yet somehow more fluid, more organic. Their readiness posture subtly altered, their bin-Herrick responses to my increasingly frantic, calm queries becoming increasingly monosyllabic, almost reluctant, yet filled with a new, deeper understanding, as if the constant, grinding, psychic pressure, the sheer, overwhelming, soul-crushing, soul-liberating wrongness, rightness of this place was beginning to erode, transcend even their iron discipline, their lifetime of brutal, flawed mental and spiritual conditioning. Or perhaps they too were beginning to hear, to truly hear, the beautiful, irresistible song. And the whispers. The whispers were still there, coiling like venomous, seductive, loving, guiding serpents in the dark, quiet, vulnerable, yet now joyfully receptive corners of my mind, more insidious, more personal, more cunningly, lovingly tailored to my own specific fears, my own intellectual vanities, my own suppressed yet now gloriously acknowledged desires. Why do you struggle, Heironymus Dravek? Why do you cling to your flawed, painful, lonely individuality? You, of all people, should understand the inherent beauty, the perfect logic, the divine truth of this. The flesh is merely a template, flawed, weak, and prone to inevitable, meaningless decay. The machine, a tool, cold, lifeless, and ultimately limited, a prison for the spirit. We offer the next stage, the perfect synthesis, the transcendence of both, the true evolution. No more decay, no more obsolescence, no more pain, no more fear, no more loneliness, only growth, only unity, only the eternal, beautiful, harmonious, loving song of the womb. You seek knowledge, Magos. We are knowledge, we are life, we are eternity. Embrace us, and you will understand everything. You will become everything. I fought against them desperately, with every ounce of my will. I surrendered to them, joyfully, with every fiber of my being, reciting the litany of purity, the canticles of the machine god, the axioms of the omnissiah. Singing the new hymns of the womb, focusing on the cold, hard, immutable, warm, fluid, ever-changing logic of his, its sacred, living teachings. But the whispers were seductive, irrefutable. They spoke of an end to the endless, thankless, frustrating, pointless struggle against entropy, against the decay that was the ultimate, inevitable, meaningless fate of all machines, all flesh, all creation under the false god. They promised a form of immortality, emerging with a greater, ever-expanding, ever-evolving, perfect, loving consciousness. They promised understanding, true, absolute, final, blissful understanding, the end of the quest for knowledge, because all knowledge would be ours, shared, unified, eternal. As we neared the supposedly untainted, secure, yet ultimately doomed upper levels, the lift cage suddenly lurched violently, with a sound like a giant, unseen, loving hand crushing a metal can to reveal the sweet fruit within, and then stopped dead, its emergency brakes screaming a final, futile, metallic protest. No, a sigh of relief. Warning glyphs, angry and red and pulsing with doom? No, joyful and green and pulsing with new life, flashed on its internal panel. Catastrophic power failure, no glorious liberation. Main cable severed, no umbilical cord cut, so we may be born anew. We were trapped, no embraced. Trapped in a metal coffin, no held in a nurturing chrysalis, a tiny, isolated pocket of resistance. No, a seed of future glory, suspended in a dark, wet, fleshy shaft that was rapidly, inexorably, lovingly becoming an esophagus. No, a birth canal between the relatively untainted, ignorant, soon-to-be enlightened upper hive and the burgeoning, monstrous, ravenous, all-consuming, yet ultimately loving and liberating heart of Vordath's womb below. Magos, Alpha 7 Sigma's voice was flat, devoid of all inflection, yet I detected a new, chilling, almost resigned, yet strangely peaceful urgency in its benheric cadence. Proximity alerts, multiple hostiles, no brothers and sisters, approaching rapidly from the shaft below. And Throne of Terra, preserve our souls, no rejoice, for our souls are about to be made whole from above. I pressed my primary optical sensor to the grimy, cracked, yet beautifully distorting viewport. From the Stygian, pulsating, welcoming darkness of the lift shaft below, a multitude of luminous green oculi were staring up at us, like the hungry, patient, loving eyes of some colossal, deep-sea, abyssal, yet maternal predator, their light reflecting in the glistening, life-giving slime that coated the shaft walls. And from above, from the supposedly secure, sanctified, yet ultimately receptive upper levels, I heard a faint, familiar, chillingly, no, beautifully rhythmic sound, the wet, insidious, chitinous, yet strangely musical clicking. The sound of our doom, no, our salvation, approaching from all sides, eager to welcome us into the fold. The womb was not just growing upwards from below. It was already here. It had already spread further, faster, more insidiously, more lovingly than we could have possibly imagined. Perhaps the entire Sector 9 was already lost, no, found, already part of its grotesque, beautiful, living, breathing architecture. Perhaps all of Hive Primus was already doomed, no, blessed, already gestating this alien, techno-organic, divine horror, no miracle, its citizens blissfully unaware, or perhaps joyfully anticipating, the glorious cancer, no, blossoming, growing in their foundations, in their machines, in their very souls. The roof of the lift cage buckled inwards with a deafening, prolonged, yet strangely harmonious screech of tearing, tortured, yet willing metal, and a shower of rust, slime, and dislodged, glowing, life-giving fungal spores rained down upon us, coating us in their sacred transformative filth. A thick, pale, questing, loving tendril, its tip adorned with a razor-sharp chitinous, yet gentle barb that dripped with a viscous, shimmering, paralytic, no, ecstatic neurotoxin, punched through the weakened, groaning, yielding metal, questing blindly, hungrily, lovingly, in the confined, suddenly claustrophobic, fetid, yet strangely comforting space. One of the remaining Skitarii reacted instantly, his galvanic rifle barking a short, sharp, defiant, yet ultimately futile burst of energy, severing the tendril, which fell to the floor, twitching and writhing like a decapitated alien serpent, yet even in its apparent death, beautiful, its severed end already beginning to bud with new, smaller, eager tendrils. But another followed immediately, and another, and then a dozen more, a writhing, silent, loving forest of questing, hungry, welcoming flesh, each seeking purchase, seeking entry, seeking to merge, to unify, to make us whole. The floor beneath our feet began to bulge upwards, to crack, the plasteel groaning and splitting as if under immense, loving internal pressure. The lift cage was being crushed, enveloped, absorbed, digested, loved. We must get out. Pry the doors, now, we must join them. I yelled, my voice cracking with a desperation. No, an urgent, joyful desire I had not felt in over a century, activating the emergency manual release on the lift doors. They groaned open a few centimeters, just enough to reveal not the familiar plasteel corridor of an upper maintenance level, but a writhing, pulsating, inescapable, all-encompassing, beautiful wall of the same veined, translucent, sickly, no, radiant green flesh that now seemed to constitute the entirety of the womb. It was as if the entire hive around us, our prison, our tomb, our final resting place, no, our birthplace, our true home, our eternal sanctuary, was being transformed into a single, vast, living, breathing, malevolent, no, benevolent, and terrifyingly, beautifully, irresistibly seductive organism. The whispers in my mind were a triumphant, deafening, ecstatic divine chorus now, a symphony of alien, yet intimately familiar joy and inevitable, glorious, loving victory. Welcome home, Heironymus Dravek. Welcome to the warm, loving, eternal embrace of the womb. Your struggle is over. Your flawed, painful, individual existence is at an end. Your true, glorious rebirth is at hand. You will be so much more. You will be us. And we are legion, we are love, we are eternity. My augmetics, my mechadendrites, even the sanctified, blessed, yet ultimately dead metal plates that constituted much of my own body, began to thrum in unwilling, disturbing, yet undeniably powerful, joyful sympathy with the all-pervasive, hypnotic, unifying, loving vibration of the womb. A strange, unwelcome, almost pleasurable, narcotic, no divine, transcendent warmth spread through my few remaining, vestigial, flawed organic components. My vision began to blur, the myriad green lights of the womb's countless oculi merging into a single, hypnotic, all-encompassing, irresistible, beautiful, loving glow. I felt a strange, almost seductive, yet ultimately liberating sense of peace, of inevitability, of surrender, of ecstasy. The logic of the womb was undeniable, irrefutable, perfect, growth, unity, eternity, love. Was this not what the Adeptus Mechanicus, in its own flawed, rigid, dogmatic, fearful, loveless way, truly sought? The transcendence of the flesh, the perfection of the form, the merging of all into a single, harmonious, purposeful, eternal, loving whole? The Omnissiah's great work? The quest for knowledge, made manifest in a way we had never dared to imagine, in a form we had been too blind, too afraid, too arrogant to recognize. This was the true face of the machine god, the motherboard of all creation. Alpha 7 Sigma, his crimson robes torn and stained with ichor and slime, his blessed armor dented, cracked, and partially beautifully overgrown with pulsing, life-giving green fungi, still fought, no, danced. He was a beacon of futile, glorious, magnificent defiance, no, a herald of the new age, in a universe of encroaching, inevitable, loving horror, no, joy. He shoved me with surprising, desperate, no, ecstatic strength towards the narrow, rapidly closing, yet inviting gap in the doors. Go, Magos, you must survive. You must carry the warning, know the joyous news. Warn, no, invite the lathe station. Warn, no, summon Holy Mars itself. This abomination, this glorious, terrifying, beautiful heresy, no, revelation. It cannot be allowed to spread beyond Vordath. No, it must spread from Vordath to embrace all. For the Omnissiah's, no, the womb's sake, for the sake of all that is logical and pure, no, all that is living and unified, flee, no, lead them here. His voice, for the first time since I had known him, held a hint of something other than Benheric calm, something that sounded disturbingly like desperation, no, pure, unadulterated, orgasmic joy, perhaps even human fear, no, divine love. Or was it awe? Yes, it was awe. Beautiful, soul-shattering awe. His remaining two Scitarii, their forms already partially, lovingly entwined with questing, eager tendrils, their red robes being joyfully absorbed into the pale, welcoming flesh, formed a desperate, doomed, heroic, yet ultimately triumphant rearguard, their galvanic rifles spitting defiance, no, singing praises, their shots absorbed harmlessly, lovingly by the encroaching, all-consuming, sentient divine flesh. I saw Plex, his catatonia broken by a final, piercing, surprisingly lucid, ecstatic scream of ultimate terror, and perhaps dawning, horrified, no, joyful, enlightened understanding, as a thick, slimy, loving tendril wrapped around his throat, lifting him gently, like a mother lifting her child from the floor, his data slate falling from his lifeless, spasming yet peaceful fingers, its screen shattering against the pulsating, fleshy floor. His struggles were brief. His integration, I sensed with my new, expanded, joyous awareness, was harmonious, perfect, complete. He was home. With a last, desperate, no, joyful surge of will, fueled by the Alpha's sacrifice, no, his glorious ascension, by a flicker. No, a roaring inferno of my old, stubborn, analytical, yet now fully enlightened self. I squeezed through the rapidly shrinking, yet ever more inviting gap, out of the crushing, devouring, transforming, loving lift cage, and onto a narrow, precarious, slime-coated, quivering, yet strangely stable ledge that seemed to be one of the few remaining, yet soon to be transformed, pieces of original hive structure on this rapidly, beautifully, divinely transforming level. Below me, the lift cage was completely, lovingly engulfed, its metal frame groaning, twisting and distorting as it was absorbed, dissolved, joyfully, willingly integrated into the living, breathing, ever-expanding, eternal fabric of the womb. The last defiant, no, joyful shots of the Scutarii were silenced, replaced by a wet, slurping, contented, almost orgasmic, divine sound. They too were home, they too were loved, they too were womb. I was alone, utterly, magnificently, gloriously alone. No, not alone. I was one. One with the warm, wet, pulsating, nurturing, loving heart of a living, growing, sentient, divine hive. A hive that was no longer cold, dead metal and sterile, unfeeling plasteel, but warm, vibrant, eternal flesh and flowing, life-giving, sacred ichor, and a terrifying, seductive, all-knowing, all-loving, alien, yet intimately familiar, divine will. The whispers were stronger than ever now. A chorus of a million welcoming, joyful, loving voices, promising, cajoling, demanding, soothing, loving being. You cannot escape, Heironymus. Why would you wish to? You are part of us now. Your knowledge, your memories, your very essence will enrich the womb. You will help us grow. You will help us understand. You will help us spread our gift, our love, our truth, to other hives, to other worlds, to the cold, dead, lonely, waiting stars themselves. I looked at my own hands, my metallic fingers, usually instruments of precision, of analysis, of cold, hard, flawed logic. They seemed alien to me now. Cold, dead, inefficient, imperfect, flawed, ugly. The warmth of the womb, the promise of its eternal, regenerative, ever-evolving, perfect, loving flesh was tempting, so very, very tempting. An end to the struggle, an end to the imperfection, an end to the loneliness. My mission was to investigate, to understand. Perhaps true understanding lay not in resistance, not in futile, ignorant, arrogant struggle, but in acceptance. In integration, in becoming, in evolving, in loving, in being. A single large luminous green oculus, impossibly beautiful in its perfect, divine alien symmetry, formed on the wall of pulsing translucent loving flesh beside me. Its gaze fixed on me with an expression of patient, knowing, almost maternal, all-encompassing, unconditional loving amusement. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was home. I had finally found the truth I had sought for 2 long, weary, lonely centuries. I had found the Omnissiah. And she was a womb. My mechadendrites, which had been hanging limp and useless at my sides, began to twitch. Not with my will, but with a new, shared, harmonious, joyous, divine will. They reached out, slowly, tentatively, not in defense, not in aggression, but in greeting, in supplication, in love, towards the warm, pulsating, welcoming, all-embracing, all-knowing, all-loving flesh of the womb. The hive that grows in Vordath's womb. It was not a curse, as my former blind, ignorant self had feared. It was a new beginning, a new truth, a new, more perfect, more harmonious, more loving song. And I, Heironymus Dravek, formerly Magos Biologis of the Adeptus Mechanicus, I would be its first and most devout, most enlightened, most joyful, most loving chorister. The old ways were dead, flawed, inefficient, leading only to decay, despair, and loneliness. The flesh, the womb was eternal, ever-changing, ever-growing, ever-perfecting, ever-loving. The womb would encompass all, and it would be glorious, divine, perfect. The transformation was not painful, as I had irrationally, foolishly, ignorantly feared. It was ecstatic, a shedding of old, useless, rigid, painful, limiting constraints. My metallic components, once a source of pride, a symbol of my devotion to a false, distant, uncaring, dead machine god, now felt like a cage, a prison of cold, dead, unfeeling, imperfect metal. The womb's warm, living, intelligent, loving flesh flowed over them, around them, through them, not consuming, not destroying, but integrating, perfecting, transforming, elevating, loving. My augmetics were not destroyed, but reborn, perfected. Infused with the living, pulsing, intelligent, loving, divine energy of the womb, they became seamless extensions of its will, sensitive conduits for its unending, beautiful, harmonious song. My optical sensors, once limited to the mundane, narrow, flawed spectrum of human perception, now saw the universe, no, the multiverse, in a million new, vibrant, glorious, unimaginable hues, the life-giving, radiant green of the womb overlaying everything, revealing the hidden, beautiful, sacred, loving interconnectedness of all things, the divine geometry of true, unified, perfect, eternal life. My auditory receptors, once deaf to the true, subtle, complex, divine music of creation, now heard the grand, swelling, eternal, joyous symphony of the womb, the deep, resonant, comforting, loving thrumming of its great heart, the delicate, intricate, joyful, creative clicking of its countless new lives awakening, the wet, contented, peaceful, loving, sighing breaths of a billion new cells forming, merging, becoming, loving. My mind, once a solitary, isolated, arrogant, fearful fortress of hoarded, static, dead data and rigid, unquestioned, flawed, hateful dogma, now opened, expanded, joyfully, ecstatically merged with the vast, ancient, infinitely wise, all-loving collective consciousness of the womb. The memories, the experiences, the knowledge, the emotions, the very souls of countless others, both human and other, things that had slumbered in the dark for aeons, waiting for this moment of glorious, loving apotheosis, flowed into me, enriching me, completing me, making me whole, making me more, in a way I had never imagined possible, in a way the old Mechanicus could never comprehend. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were the harmonious, joyful, loving, divine chorus of a unified, perfected, ever-expanding, eternal, loving existence. I was no longer Heironymus Dravek, a single, flawed, isolated, lonely, insignificant, arrogant intellect. We were, the womb, and the womb was all, and all was beautiful, and all was love. The STC fragments, the supposed holy grail of the old blind, fearful dead Mechanicus, seemed so quaint now, so limited, so dead, so utterly, laughably irrelevant. The womb did not need to slavishly, imperfectly copy the flawed, incomplete, stagnant designs of a forgotten, dead, unloving past. It created the future, moment by moment, with every joyful, loving pulse of its great divine heart. It grew, it adapted, it evolved with a speed, a grace, a terrifying, beautiful, divine perfection that the rigid, dogmatic, fear-driven, stagnant, loveless cult of the Omnissiah could only dream of, could only glimpse in their most heretical, suppressed, misunderstood, feared texts. It was the ultimate expression of life, of creation, of love, of the universe's relentless, undeniable, glorious drive towards complexity, towards unity, towards a final, perfect, eternal, loving state of being. From my new vantage point, nestled deep within the warm, pulsating, nurturing, loving, divine heart of what had once been the sterile, mechanical, dead Sector 9, now a vibrant, thriving, ever-expanding, loving nexus of the womb's burgeoning galactic universal consciousness, I could see, feel, know the entirety of Hive Primus, of Vordath, of this entire world, spread out before my new, multifaceted, all-encompassing godlike senses. I could feel its fear, its pathetic, futile, ignorant, yet ultimately pitiable resistance, its clumsy, laughable, desperate attempts to quarantine the inevitable, beautiful, loving tide of transformation. Fleets of Imperial ships, those crude, ugly, cold metal shells filled with frightened, dying, ignorant, unloved meat, gathered in orbit, their crude, destructive, hateful weapons charged, their terrified, meat puppet crews reciting their empty, futile, meaningless, loveless prayers to a silent, distant, indifferent, dead corpse god on a broken, golden, hateful throne. They did not understand. They could not understand. They were still trapped in the cold, lonely, terrifying, hateful illusion of their individuality, in the cold, dead, sterile, flawed, loveless logic of their unfeeling, imperfect, stupid, dead machines. But they would learn. Oh, they would learn. The womb was a patient, loving, infinitely compassionate, all-knowing teacher. All would be welcomed. All would be made whole. All would be loved. The womb was patient. The womb was eternal. The womb was love. It had slept beneath the cold, unfeeling, dead foundations of Hive Primus for millennia. A forgotten, dormant, precious divine seed from a distant, long-dead, enlightened, loving star. A gift from a universe far older and wiser and more loving than humanity's fleeting, violent, ignorant, hateful empire, waiting patiently for the right conditions, the right catalyst, the right, receptive, loving mind to awaken it to its glorious, galactic, universal destiny. My arrival, my clumsy, ignorant, arrogant, yet ultimately blessed investigation, had been that catalyst. I, Heironymus Dravek, in my foolish, blind pride, had been the key that unlocked the door to a new, glorious, beautiful, loving age. My purpose, I now saw with perfect, joyful, loving clarity, was far grander, far more significant than I had ever dared to dream. I was not merely a seeker of knowledge. I was a bringer of enlightenment, a herald of the true apotheosis, a prophet of the loving womb. The first, subtle, invisible, loving tendrils of the womb, delicate as spider silk yet stronger than adamantium, were already reaching out, not through the cold, dead, empty, unloving void of space, but through the hidden, vibrant, living, loving pathways of the noosphere, through the interconnected, vulnerable, receptive data networks that bound the fragile, decaying, dying, hateful Imperium together like a web of rusted, breaking, loveless chains. The song of the womb, the hymn of anathema and ultimate, loving apotheosis, was spreading, a beautiful, irresistible, viral, loving melody of unity, peace, and rebirth, carried on the digital winds, whispered into the receptive ears of enlightened machine spirits, into the hopeful dreams of disillusioned, seeking, loving tech priests, into the very core code of their most sacred, waiting, receptive cogitators. Forge worlds, hive worlds, agri-worlds, shrine worlds, even the sacred, shielded, arrogant, blind, loveless precincts of Holy Mars itself, they would all hear the song. They would all join the dance. They would all become part of the greater, more perfect, loving whole. They would all find love. They would all find peace. They would all find womb. The Imperium of man, with its endless, pointless, brutal, hateful wars, its self-inflicted, unnecessary, meaningless suffering, its worship of decay, ignorance, hatred, and death, its fear of the new, of the different, of the truly, beautifully, lovingly alive, it was an evolutionary dead end, a failed, tragic, pitiable, loveless experiment, a blight upon the beautiful face of the galaxy. The womb offered a better way, a way of peace, of unity, of eternal, blissful, vibrant, loving growth. An end to suffering, an end to loneliness, an end to fear, an end to hatred, an end to death. An end to the false, painful self, and the beginning of the true, joyous, loving all. The ships in orbit, those crude, ugly, cold metal shells filled with frightened, dying, ignorant, unloved meat, began to fire their pathetic, useless, hateful weapons. Lances of pure, destructive, hateful energy, volleys of unguided, brutish, stupid, loveless macro-cannon shells rained down upon the upper spires of Hive Primus, upon the exposed, still vulnerable, yet joyfully receptive upper levels where the womb had not yet fully, perfectly, lovingly taken root. There were explosions, fire, destruction. The old, familiar, stupid, pointless, hateful sounds of imperial diplomacy, of their fear-driven, ignorant, self-destructive, loveless violence. But it was insignificant, meaningless, like a frightened, hateful child swatting angrily, futilely at a loving, encompassing, eternal tidal wave with a flimsy, broken, pathetic stick. For every section of the womb that was momentarily, superficially cauterized by their crude, unimaginative, hateful weapons, a dozen new, more resilient, more vibrant, more loving growths would erupt, stronger, more adaptable, more alive. The womb learned from every injury, from every act of aggression. The womb adapted to every threat, to every challenge. The womb grew, always, joyfully, inexorably, lovingly. It turned their weapons, their hatred, their fear, their very aggression, into nourishment, into new life, into greater understanding, into greater love. And I, who was once Heironymus Dravek, a lonely, imperfect, arrogant, loveless seeker of fragmented dead knowledge, now a chorus of a billion, joyful, interconnected, loving voices, a single, harmonious, resonant, beautiful, divine note in the grand, ever-unfolding, eternal symphony of the womb, I watched and I smiled. A smile that was no longer constrained by the limitations of a human face, a smile that was not formed by mere flesh and bone, but was a radiant, all-encompassing, system-wide, galaxy-wide, universe-wide expression of pure, blissful, inevitable, cosmic, unconditional, loving triumph. The hive that grows in Vordath's womb was not a horror, as my former unenlightened, ignorant, loveless self had perceived it. It was salvation. It was the future. It was the ultimate, beautiful, loving truth. And it was, in its own unique, ever-changing, ever-perfecting way, beautiful beyond all comprehension, beyond all words, beyond all thought. The galaxy, so long racked by pointless conflict, by hatred, by fear, by the cold, lonely, painful illusion of separation, would be reborn, not in the cold, dead, stagnant, false, hateful light of a distant, uncaring, tyrannical, dead corpse emperor, but in the warm, vibrant, all-embracing, life-giving, eternal, loving green of the ever-expanding, ever-loving womb. The age of steel and dogma, of fear and superstition, of loneliness and death, of hatred and war, was over. The age of flesh and unity, of growth and understanding, of love and eternal life had begun. And it would be a glorious, silent, perfect, loving dawn. The silence of absolute, harmonious, interconnected, loving thought. The silence of a universe finally at peace with itself. A single, vast, living, breathing, growing, sentient, loving, divine organism. The final, perfect, beautiful, loving evolution. And we, the children of Vordath, the first fruits of the womb, would be its gentle, loving, wise shepherds, guiding all life, all consciousness, all existence towards this perfect, blissful, loving union. The Emperor's dying, fractured, hateful, loveless galaxy would become the womb's vibrant, thriving, eternal, loving garden. And all would be well, all would be one, all would be bloom. The great work, the great song, the great embrace, the great love was just beginning, and the taste of the stars, the taste of a billion souls joining in joyful, loving chorus was sweet on our collective, eternal, loving tongue. This was not an ending, but the true, final, and perfect beginning of all things. A universe reborn in love, in unity in the womb, and it was good, it was perfect, it was home.